Good morning. My name is Rod Haynes. I am your celebrant today. My wife Daria and I have been members here at this wonderful fellowship for over 6 years. Reverend Paul Beckel is currently on sabbatical until Easter time. Reverend Barbara Wells Tenhove is leading the majority of our worship services in Paul's absence. We request everyone who visits our sanctuary to honor our masking protocol. We welcome all who come in goodwill and friendship. We especially welcome those who are visiting with us for the first time. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Lumi and Nuxalk peoples. Their presence is imbued in these mountains, valleys, waterways, and shorelines. May we nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and the shared responsibilities to their homelands where we all reside today.
Well, thank you, Melanie, and thank you, my beloved. That's my husband, Jocko. Good morning, everyone. I am indeed the Reverend Dr. Barbara Wells Tenhove, sabbatical minister for a couple more months. I'm not wearing Paul's hat, but he did leave it to remind us that he is coming back. So don't get too used to me. I'd like to wave out to those of you on Zoom. It's good to have you amongst us too. This is the world of hybrid, and we're doing the best we can to make it work for everyone. Before I start reflecting on our topic this morning, I do want to just acknowledge that this week Governor Inslee announced that the mask mandate for our state will end on March 21st. Now, I'm sure we're all over the map about this decision, but rest assured, the staff and the leadership of BUF are thinking about this, planning for this, and we ask for your patience as we sort it out, and your input too. So thank you. But now let me say that we are here today, on this Sunday in particular, to acknowledge the importance of the church in our lives, to acknowledge the power of our faith to sustain and support us during good times and bad, to recognize that what we do here and say here and are here really matters. In a familiar piece written by my friend and colleague, Unitarian Universalist minister Mark Morrison Reed, who was raised as I was in this faith, and as an African American and a Canadian, knows much about widening the circle, which is our monthly theme, Mark writes, "The central task of religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of each of our individual lives. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. The religious community is essential," Mark continues, "for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together our vision widens, and our strength is renewed." Well, may our time together this morning remind us of the power of our religion and this church to widen our vision and renew our strength. And let us sing together one of my favorite hymns in our hymnal, written by another collegial friend, the Reverend Dr. Kendall Gibbons. It's hymn 51, Lady of the Season's Laughter. If you're here in the sanctuary, and even if you're at home, please rise in body or spirit, and let's sing together. Lady of the season's laughter, in the summer's warmth be near. When the winter follows after, teach us spirits not to fear. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning year. Sister of the evening starlight, in the falling shadow stay, here among us till the far light of tomorrow's dawning day. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning day.
Why do I choose BUF as my faith home? If you received the Renewing the Faith flyer in your mail this week, you may have noticed Roz Reynolds referencing the discouragement this global pandemic has brought into our lives over the past 2 years. We find ourselves tired, depressed, not a little changed as a result. I don't believe there's any going back to the pre-COVID world we once knew, but I am equally uncertain when we will arrive at wherever we are going. Sadly, millions of people across the globe have been lost, including victims you may have known and are grieving over. Roz writes about the importance of connection in difficult times. We find connections with our family, our partner, and members of this fellowship, but this requires a conscious, willful effort to make it happen. BUF connects with me each Sunday by challenging my stubborn assumptions about life. I admire Black Lives Matter for intentionally entering uncomfortable places and asking uncomfortable but necessary questions of ourselves. When Kevin and those who work through and with him produces uplifting music, I feel connected to something outside myself. And finally, to those individuals who are leading this annual Ask process we are kicking off today, I thank you sincerely for your willingness to take on this gargantuan task. No one is suggesting everything at BUF is perfect. There is no dogma here offering universal remedies for every malady. This fellowship is made up of human beings, decent, well-meaning, committed individuals who are inherently flawed. These shared imperfections help us find commonality with each other. We connect. My challenge to all of you and to myself is to look past the everyday friction to find positive connections. Keep nurturing them. We do this by affirmatively contributing energy, ideas, time, and yes, resources if you have them, to keep the lights on and the coffee pots filled here at BUF. We all know no one experiences a pain-free life. Intentionally connecting and giving helps us cope and maybe emerge stronger than before when we encounter these inevitable life challenges. Now is the time for lighting our chalice. Those looking on from home are welcome to join us by lighting your individual chalices. Reverend Barbara and I light this chalice in celebration of this remarkable fellowship, while collectively and individually renewing our commitment to support it in all the ways we possibly can. Will you join me in reciting our covenant? Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant. And I'd like to welcome Vlad and Roz to the podium. Come on up.
Get on up. Greetings.
It was the best of times.
It was the worst of times.
We never had to leave the house.
We never got to leave the house.
All of a sudden, we had time to do nothing.
all of a sudden, we had nothing to do.
We no longer had to come up with excuses not to go to parties because all the parties were canceled.
We missed seeing our friends in person.
It just goes to show that different people can experience the same events very differently.
Everyone has different needs and different perspectives,
Different abilities to cope,
different needs for human interaction.
different tolerance to risk.
Some of us are here in person,
Some of us are watching from home.
but we all affirm the same covenant.
We all seek community in this space.
Although that community may take different forms at different times.
Although our need for fellowship may look different from our neighbors,
We all believe in the transformative power of this fellowship.
and the future of this fellowship depends on all of us.
Today, we launched the 2022 Spring Canvas.
Today, we ask you to pledge generously in support of this fellowship.
This fellowship that sustains us and is in turn sustained by us.
Just as everyone has different needs and different tolerance to risk, there are different ways to pledge.
You can fill out a simple form on the BUF website,
You can email Kathy Watto with your pledge amount.
or you can request to be contacted by a very friendly canvasser.
You could meet over Zoom, talk on the phone, or possibly meet in person, depending on your respective comfort levels.
Whatever method works best for you, we do ask that you make your pledge soon.
We ask you to think about what BUF has meant for you
In the best of times,
in the worst of times.
and your hopes for the future of this fellowship.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that reminds me, we did send out a mailing. I don't know how many of you got it, but it includes a wonderful brochure that was written by Roz, and a letter from me. It's pretty dry. Just talks about kind of how things work. Has a pledging guide in the back. So, all that. But, as Steve Jobs used to say, there's one more thing. That one more thing is we're rolling out the Vlad of Buff YouTube channel. Starring yours truly. Now I have to look at my notes to make sure I do it right. At first, we're going to have two videos. Well, we already have two videos. They're up on the channel right now. The first one walks you through how to make a pledge using the form online. The second one tells you how to just email a pledge with information to Kathy Watto. Kathy Watto, I didn't say that very well. To help you find Vlad of Buff, right after the service, I'll be passing out my card for anybody who wants one. It's a very special card, I tell you. If I could only put my hands on it, then we'd be good. And so on this card, it has instructions about different ways to get to the YouTube channel. One, if you have a phone or a camera on your phone where you can scan, or with a tablet or with your computer, we actually have a QR code which will take you, if you scan that, it'll take you right to that channel. So I'll have that for you at home. If you want that card, I can email it to you. Just email stewardship@buff.org, and we'll get that out to you too. So there's more to come. As I said, that channel is going to be, I'm going to have things throughout the year, not just during the pledge drive. But at first, it'll be updates on the pledge drive. And then after that, it'll just be things about stewardship and BUF altogether. So anyway, now, thank you.
Thank you, Vlad and Roz, for being so awesome. So we're going to sing again, another one of my favorite hymns, which is Gather the Spirit, which is hymn 347. Right, Melanie? Did I get the number right? Yes. Please rise and body your spirit, and let's sing together. Gather the Spirit. Gather the Spirit, harvest the poor. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this life of anatomy. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store. Nurtured in love, thy conscience refined. With body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, a chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
And now I ask you to join me in the responsive reading, number 5, 6, 7 in the back of the hymnal. I want to be with people who submerge to the task, in the task,
Who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along.
who stand in the line and haul in their places,
Who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out.
The work of the world is common as mud, botched. It smears the hands, crumbles to dust.
But the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident.
Greek amphorous for wine or oil, Hopi vases that hold corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used.
The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
Amen.
Some years ago, Jocko and I were driving through one of the most unusual landscapes we'd ever seen. The tiny road showed us distant views of mountains, but on each side of us were fields. The vegetation was the color of wet sand. As we drove, we began to realize where we were. For here and there, deep channels in the yellowish vegetation showed the rich brown of the earth. When we finally came upon humans, we knew for certain what this landscape was. It was a peat bog. And the people who were working in the fields weren't planting or harvesting crops, they were cutting turf. In case you haven't figured it out, Jocko and I were in Western Ireland, near Connemara National Park, where some of the world's biggest and most productive peat bogs are. The workers were doing something people in Ireland have done for generations. They were cutting into the earth to create little peat logs that are used to heat homes throughout the country. The smell of peat burning, surprisingly pleasant, was a common scent in most of the towns and villages we passed. I had heard of the practice of making fuel from peat, but I didn't really understand what it meant until I saw the peat bogs being cut in Ireland. In essence, these people have learned to turn mud into fuel. Special mud, for sure, but mud nonetheless. But unlike the mud pies of my childhood, these peat logs provided the only source of heat for many, even today. Burning mud. It just seems very strange to me, but there it is. I have always been a fan of mud, although until I went to Ireland, I'd never seen it burned in a fireplace before. As a child growing up in Northern Virginia, I always loved it when spring came around and we could go out into the fields and woods that surrounded our home and get down and dirty with the earth. My mother started calling me instant dirt because I was so prone to find the most likely patch of mud to play in. There is something very pleasing about mud. Essentially just wet dirt. Mud can be shaped into pies, it can ooze through your fingers and toes, it can splash all over you in the rain. Ask most any child and they will tell you that mud is fun. Mud is also a critical link in the chain of life. Mud, or perhaps more accurately soil, covers most of the landmass on our planet. It is an essential building block in the creation of life. Without soil, plants can't grow. It's a necessary first step in the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. Recognize that? Our seventh principle. While soil, or perhaps what I more colorfully prefer to think of as mud, may be essential in the chain of life, it isn't very pretty. And because it's so ubiquitous, it's easy to forget just how important it is. Marge Piercy, in her poem To Be of Use, compares the everyday work of human beings, the work that forms the backbone of daily life, to mud. She says, the work of the world is common as mud. It's not pretty, it's not exciting, it's common. And trust me, when you're a Southerner, you know what common means. But her poem doesn't stop there. She reminds her readers that Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. We also know that they were made out of clay, which is one kind of dried mud. They are so beautiful, they sit in museums, but they were made out of common mud to be used for common work, feeding the family, watering the garden, storing the goods we use each day. The work of the world is common as mud. And today I would like to suggest that it is not only common, it is holy too. The work of the world that mud represents is holy. and essential to the life we share together in this church. I think I know something about the common holy work that Marge Piercy talks about. I have been a minister now for over 35 years, and during that time I've learned a lot about myself and congregations. And one important thing I have learned is that congregations are a lot like gardens. They are lovely, yes, but they are also muddy and messy. When I first became a minister, and you need to note that I was 25 years old, when I first became a minister, I was full of excitement and energy, like a gardener who spends the winter looking at pictures of beautiful flower beds. I had wonderful images of the blossoming of the congregation in my head. We would be deeply spiritual. We would provide the most exciting programs for adults, children, and youth. We would speak truth to power. We would serve our community in ways no other congregation had ever done before or since. And of course, I dreamed it would be a place where people would live out of their best selves and never get angry, frustrated, or bored. In essence, I had a vision of starry perfection in my eyes. And such visions are not bad things. Like the pictures of perfect gardens in magazines, they provide us with ideal images of what might be. The problem is, like that gorgeous garden, great congregations have to begin with mud. Now, what do I mean by this? No gardener can expect perfect roses to bloom without preparing the soil and getting her hands dirty in the spring. It's easy to look at the garden in full flower in June and forget the muddy months of March and April that came before. Likewise, a church cannot bloom without someone, or many someones, taking the time to prepare the ground. The wonderful blossoms of deep spiritual growth happen because someone has been willing to make sure the church ground was fertile enough for such growth to occur. Now, the muddy tasks I'm talking about are the daily acts of creating a church and its ministry. Guess what? Church life doesn't just happen. People like yourselves have to get up early on Sunday morning to do setup, to practice with the choir, check the sound equipment, hand out orders of service, and so on. Someone, and I'm looking at you, Patricia, has to create the midweek update and make sure it gets emailed to everyone week after week. Someone has to keep the books, pay the bills. Someone has to plan religious exploration programs for our young people and recruit the leaders. Someone has to plan adult programs, and others have to take care of our littlest ones when soon they are more able to return to us. Someone has to call the committee meetings and chair the board meetings and take minutes, and here's a big one, remember what decisions got made. You think I might have a little experience with this? At times it can seem like the work of building and sustaining a congregation is endless, repetitious, and just not much fun. So why is it necessary that we do it? Well, I think it's because the kind of wonderful spiritual growth we want in our congregations, that we want our congregations to provide to our members, can't happen unless we have a strong institution undergirding it. That joyful encounter between an adult and a child during a Sunday school class cannot happen unless someone spent an hour on the phone recruiting just that teacher for just that class. The deep connection felt during a pastoral call is less likely to occur unless the minister has access to a church directory with the person's contact info in it. The powerful witness that some of you make at City Hall or in the State House couldn't happen if you didn't make the commitment to be there. And the church office would feel awfully empty, and the programs that happen here would never be if someone didn't run the stewardship campaign, I'm looking at you, Roz and Rick, and make sure there was enough money to pay for our professional staff. And those powerful moments of epiphany that I believe come during worship services can't happen unless someone has planned and prepared for them, including making sure the door is unlocked, the mic set up and turned on, the chalice candle trimmed and ready to be lit, and I haven't even mentioned the amount of work doing hybrid services creates. This muddy work of supporting institutions isn't always sexy, it isn't always fun, it isn't always exciting, but it is essential, and it is holy. I am more and more convinced as I get older that developing strong institutions, which are the bearers of our liberal values, is spiritual work. In every community, in every time since the beginning of human history, the work of preparing the garden for growth has been essential in the blossoming of meaningful change. Great change can't happen unless people are willing to do the hard and at times unrewarding work of maintaining the health of institutions that matter, like this one. It matters that our congregations exist and grow strong. It matters in New York City, it matters in Seattle, it matters in San Francisco and Washington, D.C., and other great cities. And it matters in Hanska, Minnesota, Blaine, Washington, Auburn, Maine, and Astoria, Oregon, and other small communities. It matters because the blossoms that grow from our muddy gardens are beautiful and meaningful and important and holy. We have something really wonderful to offer the world, an inclusive faith that challenges us to live up to the radical principles that all people have worth and dignity and all life is interdependent. We have a faith that bears witness to the reality and the truth of unity and love. And during this pandemic, or as one friend of mine calls it, the pandamable, the work of the church has become so much harder and so much more important. As people were forced to isolate, the need to find ways to reach out and support each other became even more important. While some of you may have thought that the staff and lay leaders had far less to do during the pandemic and were sitting at home eating bonbons, let me assure you it was exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. And now, as we move slowly but inexorably to the other side of this incredibly difficult time, the work we do here to build beloved community is even more critical. How will we do church in this new, even muddier landscape? As we move out of the pandemic, reaching out to those who truly need us in our broken and hurting world will be even more critical. And for that to happen, the institutional strength of this fellowship needs to be sustained. With our time, our energy, our love, and yes, our money too. Because our UU gospel, our good news, can make a huge difference in people's lives. I know this because I have spent 35 years being witness to transformation after transformation. Transformation after transformation. When people enter into one of our communities and discover something here that allows them, allows you to blossom. Many of us long for moments of insight, for profound conversations about the meaning of life, for that feeling of soaring grace that helps us know for certain that we are not alone. All of these things can happen in congregational life, but congregational life can't happen unless the people who create the congregation are willing to dig in the mud and prepare the ground. And surprisingly, it is sometimes when we are digging in the mud that the profound connections and transformations occur. I have seen people become alive with faith at meetings in front of the copy machine, during a chat in the parking lot, and supporting our worship services and programs as so many of you do. One of the wonders of Unitarian Universalist church life is that the boundaries between the sacred and the secular need not exist. Spiritual encounters can take place anywhere, even in the middle of a mud puddle. And I think the metaphor of holy mud doesn't just end in the garden. The soil beneath our feet can be transformed into so many wonderful things. Peat becomes fire, clay becomes ceramic, sod becomes a house. Just so, the everyday work of the world can be transformed for us into moments of joy. The daily work we do together matters. Whether it's reaching out by phone to someone who is feeling lonely or making a paper chalice for a 6-year-old, it matters. Whether it's a church cleanup day or the youth group's sojourn to help out a food drive, it matters. Whether it's the monthly board meeting of the church or the local interfaith group, it matters. The work we do to build this church can provide the opportunity for growth and connection and even love to take place. But in order for a congregation to be the kind of church we want it to be, we have to do the important and essential work of being the church. We have to be friendly and caring and generous and open to new people and new ideas and new growth. We have to do the hard and challenging work of maintaining an institution that will outlast us. We have to dig our hands into the common mud of life, and from that mud, bring forth a garden. When we are all of these things, then the church reflects what is best in us, and it becomes a beloved community where real and wonderful things happen. Healthy congregations are filled with spiritual people who are willing to get their hands dirty. Healthy congregations have people in them like you, people who say yes when asked to mentor a coming-of-age kid. Any of you ever done that? Raise your hand if you have. People who agree to serve on committees. Any of you out there? Task forces. People who serve as leaders on the board and celebrants. People who give generously to our stewardship campaign. Yes, all of you are people who, as Marge Piercy reminds us, move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. As we reflect on the many gifts we have been given and will give to sustain this church we love, may we remember that the hard work of creating a living congregation is like the soil beneath our feet, essential to this life we share. May we have fun while we dig into the challenging opportunities we are given to sustain an institution that matters. May we never forget that out of the holy mud, out of the soil, the clay, and the dirt, come blossoms that delight the eye, food that feeds the hungry, fuel that warms the heart, and trees that shade us when the time comes to rest. When we gather in this beloved community, we create a circle of love and care that nurtures us. May that circle remain unbroken as we do the important work of creating a church here, together. Amen, and blessed be. And now I'll invite the choir to come forward. like to invite Emily to come forward to tell us a little bit about Lydia Place.
Well, that was a fun treat. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I was thinking last night about the first time I came up on this stage, which was 10 years ago, and I was so nervous. And I managed to stumble out a little description of Lydia Place and the services that we offer. Talked a bit about the transitional housing program and case management and the need for volunteers and the need in the community. And since that time, we have grown so significantly. It's always fun listening because thinking about things like gardens and seeds that are planted, it was, let's see, I'm not going to do math this morning, but Lydia Place has been around since 1989, so what is that, 33 years? And the seeds for Lydia Place in the dirt included a couple of women from this fellowship. And today, the organization, 33 years later, has blossomed into a rather large organization that is filling a lot of need and giving a lot of light back to this community. Today, in addition to those programs that I described 10 years ago and have sort of thought about and invested in, you all have invested in over the last 10 years, we have a mental health program in home and parenting programs. We've more than doubled our housing capacity. But as I stand here today, we have over 130 families on the waiting list. And that is a lot. It's a lot. That's the tip of the iceberg, right? There's a whole section of our community that we don't even get to serve because we're focusing on the families who are in cars and tents and sheds and other places that we don't want our children and our neighbors to live. And although that sometimes feels overwhelming, that list of families who need us, sometimes I look at the problem at hand, and these days it feels like layer after layer of crisis. And sometimes I feel like I can't. The hill is too big to climb. But then I think about the tiny seeds, and I think about all these beautiful acts of kindness and love. It's someone like you who walks in the door and randomly hands us a check for $10,000 or $200,000 and says, you know what, we had a better year than we needed to have. Keep up the good work. Or somebody who I get these little email notifications on my phone every time somebody makes a donation, and my favorite ones, this might surprise you, is this little notification for our system that says, you have a new Housing Hero, which is a monthly donation program. And I open it and I see the name, and when I see that the monthly contribution is $5, it almost makes me cry every time, because that is someone who has said, this $5 is all I can give, but it's important to someone who has even less than that. And it just fills me with inspiration and hope that together, if we keep saying yes and showing up, that we can create the communities and the world and the futures for the next generations that is so needed and so deserved. Oftentimes we think about this work, I think, as we think about families as needing saving or rescuing, but that's not really what's needed. As you all know, what we need is to fix systems of injustice that perpetuate inequities. And that is the work, right? And that requires a different type of engagement from all of us. The other thing that keeps me going is hearing stories from the families that we are able to support and serve. And one little email came to me a month ago that I've just been holding in my heart, which was a story from a case manager of a mom and her son who recently moved into housing after many months of homelessness. And the teacher at the child's school said, this child is like a different child nearly overnight, right? The aggression and the acting out, it's just gone. And that, speaking of seeds, it's so simple when we think about it, and yet we see these little lives transformed, and I think, it's okay that we haven't figured it all out yet. We need to keep turning into the problem at hand and saying yes, because every time we plant one of those seeds and make it better for even one child, it is a win. And those are the things that keep me going and know that we're gonna figure this out. Even when it looks like we are going the wrong direction, I see acts of hope and compassion and generosity all around this community, and it keeps me going, and it keeps us going at Lydia Place. It has been a hard couple of years. I think about the 10 years, it's like gone instantly, these 10 years. I've come each year to talk with you all. I see the 10 years reflected every time I look at the faces of my children as they just keep getting older. There's nothing like kids to remind you of age, right? But here we are together. And even though things sometimes look quite bleak, I know that we're going to get there. I know that we're going to keep doing the right thing, because it is that love that creates healing and opportunity for us to be our very best selves and our very best community for our neighbors. I'm out of time. I want to say thank you so much for inviting me here today. Thank you for allowing me to come every year to speak with you all. Thank you for being a part of the seeds that have created this organization. And most importantly, thank you for continuing to say yes to all of the ways that you can help your neighbors and help us build a future worthy of our children.
Wow, thank you, Emily. It's very inspiring. As Melanie plays a beautiful piece of music, I hope that everyone here will be as generous as you can be. Our collection this morning is going to Lydia Place and the incredible work they're doing. If you're here in the sanctuary, the ushers will be passing baskets, and if you're at home, there should be information on your screen about how to give. This is such important stuff we're doing. Thank you for sharing your gifts. Well, thank you all. Thanks, everyone, for your gifts and for the ways that you support this congregation. Well, the work we do, work to shelter those in need, work to create sacred space, and work to build beloved community is holy as mud. May we commit to get our hands dirty as we support communities and institutions that will outlast us. As Rod extinguishes our flaming chalice, symbol of our faith, may we go forth knowing that the work we do here is real, powerful, and life-transforming. And as we do each week, we circle round for freedom, which is the name of a hymn we sing together, hymn 155. If you're new among us, let's rise, embody your spirit, make something like a circle, And let us sing Circle Round for Freedom. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for resoul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Go in peace, my friends. Return in love. Amen, and blessed be.
Thank you.
Hey, there we go.